All right, thank you all for coming. Looks like we've got a good amount of people online as well, and I know they've been waiting, but it seems like everyone trickles in like 10 minutes past 3:30, so I just wanted to give everyone enough time to be able to get here. So thanks for coming. If you haven't been here before, these monthly meetings that we're doing are about middle housing. It's a very complex subject. You may or may not know that Washington State has changed their code to allow for more housing types and more lots, which was available in Seattle and Kirkland, which is now statewide. And with that comes a lot of different complications. It comes, a lot of different interpretations, a lot of different housing types that were not necessarily available before. This whole series is really just to unpack some of the nuancy unknowns for people who are not necessarily in the industry. And this month we're talking about how to build middle housing without breaking the bank. And that seems like a very, very tough, but also interesting subject because it is very expensive, but there are some things that you can do to make it a little bit cheaper. And I'm looking at some builders here who are already building it, and it's, being efficient. Master builders, if you're not a member or you're not involved, or you don't know kind of what they do, there's more information here. The slide deck will be available if you guys ask for it. We are recording this. It will go on YouTube for those of you who are not able to kind of catch it all, or you're online and I saw somebody was picking up their kids or whatever. If you guys want to watch it later, you can do that as well. But they do let us use this space, and they also provide a lot of information to us. So with the complexities of middle housing and all the different jurisdictions and all the different planners and reviewers, they kind of have a bunch of minions that go out and talk with all the different land use planners in different cities and counties, and then they take all that information and bring it back to the master builders, and then they provide that information to builders because, if you're going to be building and developing something, it's an investment. You want to make sure that you have the most current information, and you don't want to be buying a bad deal or making assumptions on something that isn't necessarily true. So very appreciative for everything the master builders does for us. These are the previous months that we've had. So this is our 6th month, and we have 6 more after this. The last few meetings, we were talking about just introduction to middle housing, opportunities for property owners, financing, navigating zoning and permitting, density. And so again, all of these have been recorded on YouTube. If you guys want a slide deck, I'm happy to send it over. But each month has a different topic because, again, it's a very complex, it's a lot of information to unpack. Little disclaimer here. Okay, so for those, this may be a repeat for some, but not for others, but the House bill that passed in the state, Washington State, that was in July of 2025 last year, is House Bill 1110, which, you have all these different housing types you can put on your property now, obviously if it fits and makes sense and you have all the lot coverage available and all that stuff. But you can add duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, 5, 6, basically those are all just townhomes if you look at it. Courtyard apartments, if that's something that you want to do, which is tough to pencil. Stacked flats are kind of the same. Townhouses, in my opinion, are the same as a dupe or a triplex. And then you got cottages. I will say, maybe it's a little bit of a personal bias, but the cottages seem to be the best option, especially for the east side guys, if you're not in an urban environment that's walkable. The townhouses or the triplexes or any of that kind of stuff are something that just the nationals can do a lot better, and they have a lot more levers to pull to make their cost to build and product a lot cheaper. But they're not really building cottage type houses, and they have a certain threshold of unit count that they have to get to where you can kind of provide a different product in a similar area to where you're not competing with somebody who can just take you out. House Bill 1337 is also a bill that passed the same as 1110. So you got attached ADUs. If you don't know what an ADU is, it's an attached accessory dwelling unit. A DADU is a detached accessory dwelling unit. So if you have a primary structure like your house, then you can add a couple accessory structures to the primary, whether it be attached, detached, both detached, or whatever. And then you can segregate and sell those separately if you so choose, or you can rent them out, or maybe have your mother-in-law live in one or whatever. So just more options for more people to allow for more housing types. Going to keep this rolling because I think this is very important, that what was touched on at the state level is zoning only. And when all these cities changed their code, it was based on zoning only. I was just talking with one of my clients here on a deal we're working on, and basically the public work standards, the fire code, the parking, and the tree code were all the things that we talked about. It's kind of insane, but these all kind of come together in a giant soup for a project, and you have to consider all of them, and the state and the cities and jurisdictions really only touched on zoning. So if you don't know the right questions to ask, you don't know what things to look out for, just know that all of these other things that are kind of on an iceberg, right? What is it, like 10% shows above water and 90% shows below? You got to know more about the 90%. That's where your risk is. If you want more information, all of this stuff is being recorded on the YouTube channel. The objective here is just to talk about costs. As we know, you guys probably see in all the different news articles today that construction is expensive and we want to provide more affordable housing. And how do we do that? Especially when you have affordable housing fees that you got to pay on top of all the costs of actually constructing the product. And you want to build a product that is also going to be desirable by the marketplace. And sometimes cramming every single unit on one lot, while from a financial perspective and you're in a spreadsheet, you think about it analytically, may make sense that way, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to the market. So how can we build a product type that's going to be desirable, cost effective, and something that the market actually wants to absorb? All right, so what drives up prices? It's a lot of stuff. Taxes don't help, for those of you watching all the taxes. Okay, so land has gotten really expensive. Property owners previously in the last few years have seen the prices they were getting for their land previously, and they are kind of stuck at that level. And if you bring in a lower price, the cost of your land is based off of what the exit is going to be. So after you factor in all the costs of construction and you look at how long it takes to build it and the interest and the loans and all that stuff and selling off the product, if your market values have gone down, your land price goes down. Or if you feel like there's more risk, your margin goes up and your land price goes down. And if you have an existing asset, a house, and you want to tear it down, and somebody has gotten offers previously that were $200,000 or $300,000 more than they are now, that doesn't really necessarily make somebody want to sell their house, unless they have a life event where maybe it's divorce, death, estate, land. Anyways, that's just expensive. Zoning. So while this has been relieved by the new housing codes, which is great, there are still a lot of considerations as it relates to zoning, because you've got like parking requirements that are getting relieved, which is great conceptually, but what that does is when you're submitting a project to the city and they say your parking is not required anymore, and you show parking and you are showing parking where a tree is and they make you save that tree, you lose that parking, and then that makes the product less desirable. So those zoning code regulations, if we piggyback on both of those, have an effect of the total project projected sales, which then affects the value, which affects your dirt price, which we kind of roll back up. Permitting and pre-application fees. So every city is doing everything different. You might have, like if you're up in Snohomish County, things are a little bit more straightforward. It's a little bit quicker to be able to get through a project. But before you take on a project, you're going to want to do a pre-application meeting unless you're a professional developer that knows what you can do. But even then, I would say do it, because the interpretation from different cities as this code is evolving and changing, so is their interpretation during the pre-application meeting. So we still do them all the time on all of our projects, just to make sure we can vet our assumptions with the city to make sure that when we actually bring a project submittal to the city, that it's in line with their expectations and ours. But the permitting fees are definitely not going down. As they see that you can stack more and more units on your lot, that's just more and more fees. So you got to make sure you're accounting for those correctly. But not alone permit fees, but impact fees. So if you're in Seattle, they don't charge impact fees, which is great. But the impact fees go towards your parks and your fire and your public works and everything else. So an impact fee, for example, on like a Kirkland single family, let's just say you were to split a lot and you were to put a nice single family house there. It costs you like 35 grand just on your impact fees. That's not including your connection fees for your sewer or your storm. That's not including your permitting fees. That's just a loan. And then now affordable housing fees are on top of that. So if you think about it, it's like, man, it's like death by a thousand cuts. It's fee after fee after fee after fee. but you have to account for them, and that drives your land price down, which then goes back to why it's expensive. So we're going to talk about why it's expensive and then how we can try and bring it back to make it a little bit more affordable. Building materials, the Washington State Energy Code, and also kind of some of the IBC things that have recently passed make the homes that we're building much more expensive than they used to be. We're in 2021 now for the building code, I believe, and you have to put like insulation not only on the inside of the house, which is pretty typical, but now you have to put it on the exterior of the house. And so that's just one more thing, and you have to make them so airtight and do these blower door tests that just makes them like it's great, you're being very tight, but you don't have any fresh air that comes through. And so now you have to put in these HRVs, and you have to make sure you've got all this extra venting everywhere, but at the same time super airtight. So the building materials, there's just more innovation that's coming, and it's making it more expensive, and you have to be cognizant of that as you're kind of factoring in the cost to build your project. Labor, we all know the cost of living around here is expensive, and so we need to factor in a good living wage for the people who are building the homes and making it livable for them here. Financing, depending on who you're using, could be more expensive, it could be cheaper, and just a factor into your equation of what your total financial projections come out to be. So it could be 1 or 2 points over prime plus some points on top of that. It could be 10 to 12% plus points. It just kind of depends. But as rates come down and prime comes down, your cost of financing will come down, but you may want to add a little bit of buffer in there in case they decide to slip back up. Insurance, as you guys all know, everyone watches and sees the fires, the floods. That's just going to make insurance more expensive, but you got to account for it. So that's something you got to add in. Parking requirements, we kind of talked about that. And then all the different property taxes. So when we are underwriting a deal, we also underwrite all of the taxes that go into the property. If you're going to buy it and hold it for 12 months and then build it and then sell out of it, and maybe a 24 to 30 months, depending on how big the project is, and you want to factor in all the taxes you got to pay along the way while you're holding that project. And those definitely are not going down. Well, affordable housing fees, for those of you who don't know, we kind of touched on that previously, but those fees are different based on different jurisdictions. Sometimes it's a fee based off the product type. Sometimes it's a fee based on a price per square foot. Sometimes it's like, for Kirkland, for example, anything over 2,000 square feet, there's an affordable housing fee that you've got to pay. So if you want to build like a 4,000 square foot house, you're exempt up to 2,000. Then after 2,000, you got to pay a fee. For Redmond, it's across all product types, 30 bucks a foot, 40 bucks a foot. It just depends on if you're attached or detached. They've rolled those back, but then they are slowly kicking up over time. So you got to factor that in as well. All right, so why is land so expensive? Growth Management Act, if you guys haven't looked into this, what this is doing is trying to keep builders from what they're calling urban sprawl. It's been around since, I think, 1999. 1990, long time. But as you can imagine, everything's based on supply and demand, right? So supply and demand of, well, what it used to be in 1990 is you had a lot more supply of land, which wasn't developed, which then kind of kept things a little bit more flat. But as we have, Amazon that comes here, and we got TikTok here, and we got Facebook here, and you got all these different companies that are coming here, and you're not able to develop out of this urban growth boundary based on the Growth Management Act, it's kind of constrained development, because then you have to go through the county, and nobody really wants to do that. That's a whole nother conversation. But that is, made the supply limited and the demand high, which then kind of drives up the prices. So that is the reason, one of the reasons why land is so expensive. Zoning restrictions we kind of talked about. But if we want to dig in a little bit more, previously, before all the middle housing stuff was enacted, you'd have to go, like, before all the middle housing stuff, you'd have to plat. If you got, let's say, a 5-acre lot and it was zoned R7200 or whatever, you take out 20% for your roads and sidewalks and infrastructure and stuff like that, and then you could subdivide that into a plat. Well, it's going to take you probably 5 years, 6 years to get through a plat, because you got to, even if you're in the UGA, you have to go through all the platting action, you got to do all the infrastructure improvements, you got to get it recorded, you got to submit your building permits, you got to build them, you got to sell them. It's a long time, and so it's not quick. But that's a lot of the reason why it takes a little bit longer. Regional growth, we talked about that. Topography, so obviously we have beautiful lakes, we got trees, we got mountains, which we wish we had snow on right now, which hopefully we're getting some snow, which is great. But that constrains the land even more because you don't have the land supply to be able to actually build anything. If you go out to Arizona, you go out to Texas, it's like flat for as far as you can see. And so like this urban sprawl isn't really a thing. You just kind of build. It's crazy. I went to Dallas and I was like visiting my aunts and like it seems like people just throw a dart and they're like, yeah, we're going to build like 500 homes right there. Can't really do that here. Geological hazards, you got wetlands, you got, steep slopes, like all of these things. I have a lot of people that send me lots and they're like, oh, hey, this is like an acre lot. It's a great deal. And then I look at it and I'm like, yeah, half of it's like a cliff. You know what I mean? So you can't really do what you think you can. Highly regulated. Yeah, so I guess I've kind of already talked about that a little bit, but like just the energy codes, those are an issue that we're probably never going to be able to get all the way through. Environment regulations. God, what is that, Troy, that they just came out with? It is the critical area designation that they just increased it, right? Kirkland's, Redmond, all these different places. So like if you're not familiar, you've got a wetland, let's say you live in like one of these houses or something over here. The critical area designation that showed that you had to have a 100-foot buffer from this to be able to build, because this is like an ecosystem for all of the cranes and I'm talking like all the bird cranes and all the beavers and all that stuff. And then now that is like 150 feet or it's 200 feet. And so that just consistently kind of increases further and further away from these wetland areas. And it's on best available science, which is open for interpretation. And that just limits the amount of homes that you can build, but the environment regulations just limits that land area as well. Time that it takes to review. So different jurisdictions some are more relaxed. Snohomish County is more relaxed. Some smaller cities are more relaxed. But when you get into kind of the more dense area, it takes a while to get through a permit review. I'll just give you an example. Like we have a property we're working on with a client where it's in Kirkland's. They have a nice house and they've got a big side yard and they want to put a cottage there, build it, move into it, and then sell off their big house, and then they'll own that cottage free and clear plus profit. But we're almost a year into building permits and we don't have it yet. And I will say that we are super fast at getting corrections in. It'll be a year in April, and we started last April. So it's like, you think about like the time that it takes to go with the city, but you have to factor in the time that it takes to package up the submittal. So you got your architect, you got your civil, you got your structural, you got your arborist, you got your geotech, you got your infiltration testing, all this stuff that you're packaging together. It will take you about 90 to 100, 120 days maybe. You submit it to the city and they go through 3 rounds of review, and each round of review with the city will take 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. And you got to do that 3 times. That's about a year for one house. So this is why it's expensive. Reviews may not be consistent also. We're running into that. Interpretation changes. NAHB, if you guys don't know what that is, National Association of Housing Builders. They're kind of nationwide. They work with Master Builders Association. They bring a lot of national regulation to local government and vice versa. We try and see if we can do something at the state or national level to help out with housing. Another thing that Master Builders does for us. And then the millionaire's tax. If you guys haven't read into that, it's based on your total income. And when you're a builder, sometimes you may have good years and sometimes you may not have super good years. And you want to be able to kind of adjust things as needed, but that just kind of adds into the total equation of your cost of the land and the margin and all that stuff. Yeah, so when I got into construction, if you guys don't know like my personal background, but I was a carpenter like 20 years ago. It makes me sound old. But anyways, when I got in, I got directly entered in the carpenter's apprenticeship program, and the median age of labor when I was getting in was around the same age, but there's not a lot of people, there's not like shop class really anymore. You have like some Renton Technical College, where I went for my carpenter's apprenticeship, you have some of that, but it's not necessarily readily available because most people come here for tech, and people that are having kids in school tell them they got to go to college and then they get a degree in tech of some sort. So the supply and demand of labor is also, you know, a little bit out of balance. We need more people that are getting into the trades because, you know, it's a good job, and just because you start there doesn't mean that's where you're going to end, but you know, it's an alternative, but you got a lot of people getting out of the business who aren't necessarily getting their shoes filled by somebody else. And so if you look at it from like a plumber or electrical contractor or siding or roofing guy, that's supply and demand, right? As the demand for housing continues to go up and there's a limited supply of contractors to be able to do the work, the cost of that work goes up, right? As the supply or the demand for that housing type goes down, the costs of them may go down a little bit, but it's not going to go down super a lot. But something to consider. Material shortages. As we're looking at projects, we're always factoring in a good contingency, because if you guys were or were not building during COVID, you saw that lumber went up like 200% or something like that. It was bananas. And then concrete did the same thing. They had a concrete strike. And so, you know, these are things that all factor into your total project and your cost. And, you know, sometimes you just got to eat some of that. Yeah, permitting is complex and hyper-local. Kind of talked about that. Not as straightforward. I think this is a lot of the reason why we're providing this development services that we're providing to property owners, because it is so complex. And if you're a guy who has, or gal or whatever, that has a lot that you know, you've had as a rental for a long time, and now you can put 3 or 4 homes on it, and you're working a tech job or some other kind of job, and you're not in it every day, this is gonna be tough. We had just had a guy today sign up for our pre-feasibility. He has a property in Linwood. It's like almost 18,000 square foot lot. He's got an existing house on it, and you can carve out the back and build a duplex back there. He's been working on that since 2018. Like, that's a long time. And he's like, yeah, I sell medical equipment. I've owned this for a while. The house is a rental. It's still a good deal, but man, I don't know what I'm doing. Everything I come into a roadblock. Like, can you guys just pick it up and run with it? So it's just like, you know, I see a lot of people that want to get into it, and then once they get into it, they're like, oh shit, like this is tough. So knowing the right questions, knowing, you know, what to ask, how to ask it, how to navigate through all of these different things is like really important, because if you try and DIY figure it out, and you say, I'm trying to save some money by doing it myself, you're gonna end up spending more money on interest and time and figuring it out and redesign fees and permit fees for something that maybe wasn't even available before. And then you take that package and you send it to a lender once you finally get it finished down the road 4 years from then. And then the lender goes, yeah, this isn't pencil. I've seen that too. And so it's just like, let's try and save you some pain and suffering. And if it doesn't make sense, let's not do it. So anyways, project management. Yeah, I mean, it's really important to have a good project manager that understands the costs, that understands the process, and how we can control what we can. I will say that goes back to the builder that you're hiring, really important, as they are in it every day, working with multiple different people on different projects. This is really, really important. So if you guys are thinking about developing a piece of property, or you're working with a builder and you don't know what to look for, or you don't know what a project manager does, like these are the things that they are directly impacted on. I used to do this way back in the day when I was working in commercial construction, but we were, you know, building high rises or hotels or whatever. But you want to understand like how the choices that are made during design are directly impacting your cost and your schedule of what you're building in the future. So if you're planning on building something and you're designing something and you're just following the process of whatever the architect is telling you, and you don't understand how the details that they're detailing are going to affect your total project cost down the road, you really want to be able to get a good builder in early on as you're designing to make sure that you can kind of catch some of those issues down the road. Otherwise, you may be value engineering in the field or doing a post-permit revision, and that just is more time and money. So understanding material pricing, labor and efficiency, how some changes that you don't catch early on will affect change orders down the road, which then ultimately delays the project. And as you build, that adds more cost, which then adds more interest, which then kind of diminishes the the return on the deal. So just all good reasons why you should have someone early on looking at design drawings as you're building or planning to build. This is actually a project. I don't know if you guys have seen this. This is over by Newport Way. Have you guys seen this deal? You guys know that one? Yeah. It's like, what, 58 townhomes or something like that? Okay, so like, do you guys know anything about this deal? You met the owner? It just restarted? Okay. I actually met with so somebody that I know knows the owner. I haven't met this person. And if you're on, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to, I'm using you as an example, but not in a bad way. This is more just for educational purposes. But they came here from out of town with the expectation that it was going to be like, I'm going to put some cash in, I'm going to buy this lot, I'm going to build these homes, I'm going to sell it off. But I think that, what was that, like 2021 when they bought this deal? And then they got stalled, and then they had to go and do some permit review revisions, and then that took a year and a half, and it's just taken a long time. I don't know the full details, but what I'm getting at is if you don't have the right team to work on your behalf, or you don't know what you're doing because you're from out of town, that makes it that much more important to work with someone who does, because you're going to have a project which is 58 townhomes that everyone has seen that is stalled and sitting there and wondering what's going on, and that's not cheap. And at the end of the day, if you're going to build something, you want it to be profitable, I think, right? So, anyways, yeah.
Thank you, Lynn, over that.
Yeah, I don't want to.
When you're that happens.
Yeah, I don't want to put that out there because I don't know all the details, but just an example of making sure you got the right team. All right. Okay, so early on when you're designing a project, I think personally, we know what the market wants here in the Pacific Northwest. They want craftsman, 2-story, comp roof, no TPO. I know the modern stuff looks really cool, but it's expensive. And so if you can look at those designs early on as you're working with your architect and saying, like, this is the product that I want, and I know I don't have a lot of complex roof lines. I'm not going to have a lot of crickets and all these different things that are on your roof. Like, I know that the black in, black out windows are really nice. Like, I get it. But they do cost 20% more. Factor that into your budget. But anyways, making sure that you know, like, the design elements as you're working through stuff. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here, but the stack, this is I see, roof lines. So if you're building like townhomes, or you've got let's just say you have a stacked let's say, what am I trying to say? A 2-story, and you can have all of your kitchens and your bathrooms stacked. You're going to be able to be more efficient with your plumbing because you don't have plumbing running all over the place. Does that make sense? The more plumbing, the more holes, the more time, the more it's going to cost. So stacking your wet areas vertically. If you do this in townhomes, this is a little bit easier if that's what you decide to do. You got a fire-rated party wall, and then you kind of have them back to back, and you've got a furred out wall on both sides. And then if you look kind of like top to bottom in your elevation, if you can see like a laundry room and a bathroom and your kitchen, and then you've got your master, and then you have all the same pipe running all the way down, you don't have like this spaghetti line of all these different pipes running around everywhere. So less time, less money, also less headaches. Basements, I think they are good in the right condition. If you have a slope and you want to do a daylight basement, which then is going to be a bonus room that goes to a nice big backyard, that's very different than just saying, like, I see homes are selling for X amount of dollars and I need to grab some more square footage. So I'm then just like dig this big hole and I want to build a basement, because that's going to have more cost for your foundation. You got to do pumps that pump everything up to the street, and you got to do damp proofing and waterproofing all the way on the outside. And if it doesn't daylight into an outside area, I've just noticed that the buyers don't really like it as much. Plus, if you're trying to add an extra bedroom down there, you know, like it seems like if the primary is on the main floor is what most people are trying to get, like if you're thinking about mother-in-law living with you, most people want to have like no stairs if that's going to be for their in-laws or something like that. So basements, well, it might be nice if you think about it personally for your own use, it's fine. But if you're going to be going out to the market, I don't see them being very well received, and just grabbing the extra square footage, a lot of times you don't get paid back. So just if it is, make sure you daylight basement it, because then you have outdoor space, which you'll probably have a covered deck at that point. Simplify roof lines, like really nice, like it just depends. If you're building a custom or a spec, but most times what I'm talking about is not building a custom, we're talking about building a spec. This is building a home for investment, which you're then going to sell. So as you can eliminate super complex roof lines and or flat ones, which will be an issue down the road, like this will help you. And comp roof, if you don't know what that is, it's like a shingle rather than a TPO, which is a flat. It's just cheaper. When you're designing a project, if you're able to mirror and use the same floor plan, I don't know, let's see if I have an example here. No. Maybe there's another picture coming up. But if you have a project with multiple units, if you're able to stamp or use the same type of laid out unit and just add different exterior colors or specs, you'll have more efficiency when you're building out that unit, because you're not having a custom home every single time. And then if you're building and selling multiple lots and you know that you've built this unit 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and then you take that unit and you stamp it over here, every time you build something, the first time is the most expensive. It was the same as when I was working on building high rises. The first 4 floors were the most expensive. First you got like all of your, you've got all your retail space on the first floor and your second floor, and then your third, fourth, that's like your walls and your columns and your decks. And then you get a system down. You know that you can cut this corner, which will save time here, which then is less cuts there. And it's like, you know, measure twice, cut once always. But if you've measured 2, 3, 4, 5 times, like you know what cut to make on the next 3, 4, 5 houses, because it's the same house and you built it over and over again. And if you have a plumber, an electrical guy, a roofing guy, a siding guy, and they've all built that home 3 or 4 times, they've got a system down. They can crank those things out. And so then you can be more efficient with how you're building those homes. Does that kind of all make sense? It is really tough, though, I will say, on infill lots here, when you got to factor in all the things. Not every lot is exactly the same size. You have trees that are factoring into what you can build. You may have to like carve out a unit for some roots or something like that. It's not super easy, but if you can, just think about reusing if you're building multiple sites. Structural steel, it is nice, I will say. Everyone likes to be open, which is great. But like cantilevers and stuff like that, this is very much more like a custom home, which is more of a dramatic example. But like if you have, like let's say some townhomes and you got cantilevers coming out over to be able to grab some extra square footage of above, you have a lot more design and engineering that goes into the design itself. And then usually you have some sort of steel, which is going to come into the framing, which you may not even see to the naked eye, but it's actually behind the walls to be able to allow for you to cantilever out. And it just costs more. So if it's not necessary, don't do it. Mechanical rooms, if you can centralize everything, this I think is be more for like a little bit of a bigger project. But if you can stack all of your mechanical in one room, it's going to be more efficient. I kind of noted this earlier, but pre-application meetings, if you're going to be building a project, make sure you have a good design professional. Make sure your civil engineer takes a look at it. Make sure you understand the zoning. Put together a full packet. Read through the code. Submit something to the city which you are planning to build, which makes sense, and get their feedback on it. Because I've seen a lot of people that go through the process of just submitting something, and then the city comes back and says, oh, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, and you got to redesign this and you got to redesign that, and now you've wasted all that time, and now you got to pay the architect and all the design engineers to be able to redesign something which you couldn't do from the get-go. And so if you sometimes, if you guys know the saying of slowing down to speed up, slow down a little bit, submit a good packet, make sure that you get good feedback on it. You take that feedback in considerations and you go back to your design professionals and put something through that's hopefully going to only go through 2 rounds of reviews rather than 3 or 4, right? So a little bit of extra time saved up front will then help you out in the back end, hopefully. I guess I didn't touch on this one, but extra fees, there's all kinds of extra fees. City will always try and charge you extra fees. Extra curb cuts, extra utilities. I guess case in point, this is a little bit of an example, but like technically in Kirkland, let's just say, just because it's one that I know really well, if you want to build multiple units on one site, let's call it an 80-unit dadu, if you were going to do that, you can technically share your water meters, which I don't suggest you do, or you can have separate water meters. And if you don't know what that means, it's like you got to turn on your water and you get water. But you have a water meter that shows how much water you've used. You can get that water from your single family and it can come through a sub-meter which shows how much usage you've had, and that may save money on the cost of construction, but the buyers don't really like it, because then you have to like work with your neighbor on how much usage of water you've used and stuff like that. So a little bit weird, but a more of an extreme example, but you can add multiple water meters to each unit, which may be more expensive on the cost of construction side, but it's not going to lower your cost of the sale as much because people just don't like how it lives and feels. So something to consider. Project schedule, obviously shorter build times, if you can do that. But if you, like I said, if you're stamping and reusing multiple units that you've built in the past, or you're working with a builder who's built those units in the past, and they are able to be efficient with that type of project because they've built that thing 3 or 4 times or however many times before, you can shorten the timeline to build. And there's a realistic amount of time that you can shorten. It's not like you're going to say you're going to build a house in 2 months by any means, but it's not like building a custom home and you have to figure it out every single time. So long lead time items. So for those of you who don't know, like everything's like, if you can go to Home Depot and you can get, I don't know, faucets. But if you're ordering windows, it may take you like 8 to 10 weeks, depending on where you get your windows. Cabinets may take you 14 weeks. But if you're like in the middle of framing out your project and you're like, shit, I don't know what kind of cabinets I want. And now you got to go find the cabinets and you got to get them designed and you got to get them fitted and then you got to get them ordered, and it takes you 14 weeks. Like you're going to be sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting for your cabinets. So if you can kind of look forward at what needs to go in your project schedule and then work backwards based on the lead times when you're talking to your suppliers and your subcontractors, how long does it take for this ordered material, and then work back, and that's when you need to order it. So that way, as you're working forward through the project, that stuff's already there. You ready to put cabinets in? They're going in. You're not sitting around waiting. So yeah, windows, heat pumps, things like that. Like there's all kinds of things that pop up, like PSE had transformers that were a shortage. Like if you don't know what that is, like they're everywhere. You can see them on power poles, but like that was an issue. That took like 6 months. So you're like, okay, I gotta order those probably right after you get permits. It's just stuff like that. Yeah, picking the right contractor. There's a lot of different types of projects that we could talk about, but I'm specifically focused on middle housing. And you know, if you've got a guy who just builds custom homes and they don't do density, they don't understand like working with the jurisdiction and how to build multiple homes on one lot and all the different little nuancy things that goes along with it, you're probably going to take a little bit longer. So picking the right contractor, making sure that they understand how to build that type of product. It's an investment project. It's not a custom. It's just going to cost less. It's going to go quicker. Yeah, this is kind of funny. Sorry if there's any architects on here. But yeah, but architects, I mean, like, I will say I'm not an architect. I am not a design guy. I am not a guy who's going to tell you that I think that that flooring and that cabinet goes good together. I mean, like, when it goes in, I like it. I'm like, oh, that looks good. But when it doesn't look good, I'm like, I don't like that either. You know, but I can't tell you what's going in there. But the architects, like, they have a very creative mind, and they ultimately want to see their project come to fruition, and they want to see it built. But you have different types of architects for different types of things. You got some that are building a custom. You got some that are trying to build for an award because, like, you know, they want it to be this really nice fancy thing, and it gets put up on their wall, and they talk about it with all their staff, and that's all good. Like, I'm good with that. But not if you're doing it for investment purposes. You want to be quick, you want to make good decisions, you want to get through it, and you need someone who is efficient with their design as well. And they understand that because you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Yeah, again, if you're building the same project 2, 3, 4 times and using the same crew, it's going to end up costing you less over time. This is just kind of the capital stack financing. If you are taking longer, it's going to cost you more, obviously. But if you don't know kind of how the financial side goes, just real quick on that, like the more you spend, the more your interest is. Like if you say like this is going to be a $3 million project build, they don't just start charging you 10% interest right on the full $3 million. It's as you accrue costs, your interest goes up. So it kind of goes like this, and then as you sell out, it starts to go like this. And so just taking that into consideration, like the longer you go and the more your cost goes up, that interest is then going to kind of plateau, and then it may take you a little bit for it to kind of flatten out. But then as that goes up, it's going to cost more. So again, kind of going back to all the things that we talked about that can help lower that, minimizing your carry time. A lot of sellers want to be able to close like right now. I want $1 million right now. But if you can get closed on permits, it's going to be way better. Because at the end of the day, if you're buying a deal, unless you're buying it cash, you have to pay interest on it. Or if you're buying it cash, I mean, like you got to think about your opportunity cost of you just sitting on that deal until you get permits. Structuring your deals with closing upon building permits is always going to be better because you carry out the time that's going to take, because you don't actually put the loan into effect until you're able to enact the business plan. You have permits in hand, you can break ground once you close, that shortens the interest amount, and it kind of goes back into your total cost projection. I don't do this, but this is another way that you could do things. But if you've got like somebody that wants to participate in the upside of the deal, you can have the seller carry a portion of their property back as the equity, lowers your cost of the total loan, it lessens the risk. They share in the upside as well. I don't really want to get in bed financially with a bunch of people I don't know, so I don't do this, but it's a creative way that you can lower your costs. We kind of talked about this a little bit. Cantilevers, standardizing door sizes. Custom doors are cool, but they're expensive. Know what you're building for what market you're building in. You don't want to just overbuild for something that you're not going to get a return on. Reusing existing services. So you guys probably have seen like a lot of MN Homes or Murray Franklin or some of these guys that just tear one house down and put one house up. That's going to be like, if that's your jam, totally cool. But some of the ways that they're saving costs is that like you're reusing the existing services, right? So if a house was torn down before, it's got a 3/4 inch water meter in there, might have to bump it up to a 1 inch depending on the size of the house or the water flow that's in the street or any of that stuff. But in most cases, you could just reuse it. Same thing with the sewer. You already have a sewer line that's in the street and going to the house. Tearing one house down, putting one house up, you just tap right into that thing, line it, and call it a day. So if you can just reuse, it's going to be less expensive. And also it'll shorten all of your timelines and everything like that. So it's an option. Exit strategy, pre-sales. We just sold out a project with a client where, you know, they were out 3 months out from finishing. They had a similar project, which, you know, they just sold, and we were able to get all of that information and put it in the sale, the listing. And you could paint this vision for these buyers of what home is going to be finished, what kind of specs are going to be done. If you can sell a home at the moment that you've got C of O, it's going to lower your cost because you're not having to then carry it for 2-3 months or 4 or whatever after you're done, right? I mean, ultimately, like, buyers don't really have a lot of vision, and you want to be able to paint that vision. You want to be able to have it staged and it's perfect and it's nice and it smells good and all that. But if you ideally are able to sell units before they're done, it just lowers your cost because of interest and all that stuff. However, you may get some custom changes that kind of factor in. Portfolio thinking. I'm not sure how many people here are kind of like looking at building a portfolio or standardizing things or doing multiple projects or any of that kind of stuff. But if you have a system and a process with one GC and you're not working with 5 or 6 different GCs, then your communication is more streamlined. You have a process in place. You know what to do. You know how to do it. There's less micromanaging, and it just you can move through a project quicker. That's what we do because it's just more efficient. Yeah, and then also you can bulk buy things. So like if you've built the same unit multiple times and you know that in your pipeline you've got 30 homes or something like that, and you can go to your supplier and say, I got 30 homes in my pipeline, what can you give me from appliance costs if I'm going to buy them from you? They can drop the pricing on their appliances. They can drop the pricing on their windows if you're buying them all from the same guy. Same thing with roofing. So if you think about building that out, that's how a lot of like the nationals work, right? Their cost to build is way cheaper because they can go to their lumber supplier, their window guy, and say, hey, I've got 100 units in my pipeline in this area. What can you give me? It's kind of like the Costco method, right? The more bulk you buy, the less cost it is. Yeah, so reuse everything, speed, certainty. Yeah, this is more about us, our development experience. If you haven't taken a look, we actually just launched our new website. So we've had a lot of people reaching out, asking for information, also wanting to maybe build out something on their site. And you know, this is private wealth advisors, lenders, you've got architects, all different types of people that have clients, or yourself maybe that has a property that you want to redevelop. It's much more intuitive. It's got a lot more information in there, so go check it out. In that, there's a pre-feasibility, so kind of going back into all of these costs and bringing it back to the very beginning. If you've got a property which has opportunity and you don't know where to start, like we're already buying, building, developing for ourselves, we're doing it for other people, we have that efficiency, we can drive those costs down because we have that bulk buy model with our suppliers and our subcontractors, and then therefore that gets passed on to the customer because they're in that pipeline with us. But also if you're like, hey, I've got this big lot and I don't know what I can do or how I can do it or what's most desirable or what the cost is or any of that kind of stuff, that pre-feasibility is like the cost of a home inspection. It's like $800. And we'll lay out a full business plan, which is how many units can you build, how much is going to cost, how long is it going to take, you know, what does the market want, all that stuff. And it sets you off on the right foot to make sure that you're making the best informed decisions and you're not going through those steps of designing something that is then going to get pushed back by the city and then have to do all those redesigns. So that's what the pre-feasibility is. You can check out more on our website. These are the things that are included. I'm not going to go into that level of detail. If you guys want to take a look, it's here. These are the different types of people that benefit. We're seeing land use attorneys reach out, architects, I guess, real quick on that, like they have a client who wants to do something, who can't give them direction on what to design. They then say, go to Liberty, and they'll kind of lay you out, like, what's the best option for you. Real estate brokers, like, I'm actually speaking at the Seattle Agent Magazine Summit, which is supposed to be at the Avenue building here next month. And the reason why they asked me to speak is because, like, now that you have this option to add multiple homes to your property or any client's property, like, a lot of agents don't understand, like, what the land is worth or the reasons why. And if you try and ask an appraiser or whatever, like you need to really understand what the cost is with the affordable housing fees, with the impact fees, how many units you can fit on there, all the infrastructure improvements, dragging all the utilities to the site, and all of those factor into like what the cost of your land is, which then you can go to your client and say, this is what I believe your property is worth or what your land is worth. And if you can't evaluate that properly, I've seen people put stuff up on the market for like $3 million. And if I look at it, it's worth like $1 million because they're not factoring in all the things that go along with it. They just see that technically you can put 8 units on their property, but you know, there's a lot of reasons why it's not worth $3 million. So real estate brokers, private wealth advisors, their clients now have property that you can redevelop, which then provides capital injection for them to then go back and put in the market. So that's an interesting opportunity. Obviously, property owners want to know what they can do. Real estate investors, we have some people that are like wanting to buy their first deal, but they don't understand what the cost of the dirt is worth, or they've never built anything before. They're just a tech guy who wants to try and make some extra money, but they don't know what they're doing, and so they're going to lower their risk by working with us. some small scale developers or builders, like they are in the trenches, they're building the stuff, and they got a deal, and they don't want to work on all the permits and stuff like that, so we're helping them through that. Yeah, these are just some few scenarios of different people that are coming our way to have us help them, just so you guys are aware. Yeah, after pre-feasibility, we'll just kind of help you through the process if you guys want to move forward. And so we lay out a clear project plan for you, which then gives you, scheduling and budgeting and everything else that goes along with your project. And then we coordinate all the architects and the civil engineers and the contractors and stuff like that to make sure that, like, if you're going to be doing this project, you don't have to get in and micromanage everything, as we're doing all that for you. We also work with the lender through their draw process, because if you've never done one of those before, that is a lot, depending on who you're working with. So that's something that's really helpful for a lot of people, and we're managing all the timelines and everything. This is kind of just an example of what a project timeline looks like. So you can either do a free call for 15 minutes, you can do the pre-feasibility. If you want to move forward, you got development services, then we kick off the project and we start kind of in this format. Obviously, these lines don't really mean much other than a visual representation, but on these middle housing projects, the goal is to be in and out within 24 months. It just kind of depends on the size of the deal and where it's located, the jurisdiction you're working in, and stuff like that, but just an example. Yeah, and that's it. Is everyone still awake? Anyone have any questions? What's up?
It's not really a question. I want to thank you for doing this. Ryan and his team have been great partners so far. We've only used them for a little bit, but this is really great information.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think our goal at the end of the day is just really to try and make sure that people make a good decision. We've had a lot of people that have come to us who have been in a deal trying to figure it out for months or years, and they just get stuck in this like spiral. And like, I don't want people to waste time or money. So just start off on the right foot.